Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Thursday's edition of Alaska Weather, January 13th, 2022. I'm David Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service. I'll be hosting today's show. First graphic up is the hazardous weather graphic, and we've got winter weather advisory out for the northern Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref area, and along the northwest coast, and that due to northeast winds of 45 to 55 miles an hour in gusts. That's creating blowing snow and reduced visibility, sometimes to less than half a mile at times. That's out tonight into tomorrow. Also, a winter weather advisory out for the central interior, the Koyukuk Valley down toward Tanana, and the upper Yukon Valley. That's for 1 to 3 inches of snow expected to fall across some areas there, with northeast winds gusting to 45 miles an hour, especially over any summits and higher terrain. That'll also reduce visibilities to less than half a mile at times tonight in through tomorrow. And for tonight, excuse me, Copper River Basin, mostly the southern Copper River Basin, winter weather advisory out there for possibly 6 to 10 inches of snow to fall, and that's mostly south of Copper Center, I believe. Lighter amounts up to the north there. So that mostly just for a snow advisory and not so much wind blowing the snow around. And so moving on to next graphic here, showing expected snowfall totals for the south central Alaska area for through tomorrow, actually, and that through Friday afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, and not very impressive there through the Cook Inlet up into the Susitna Madanuska Valley, generally less than an inch, and then maybe a little bit more in the Madanuska Valley toward Eureka, 1 to 2 inches, but nothing very significant. Copper River Basin, heaviest amounts will be along the coast range. Exception, Prince William Sound, Valdez picking about 8 to 10 inches, possibly around there, and upslope areas, you can see much heavier amounts there. Northern Prince William Sound in the mountainous terrain, as well as the southern Seward Peninsula. And also for the western Alaska Range on the eastern slopes there, those amounts increase dramatically with the upslope of the mountainous terrain, as they usually do, but otherwise just kind of a light snowfall by comparison to what it otherwise could be. And a little bit heavier snow expected over the area from Haines, up Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay area, up towards Skagway, 2 to 3 inches possibly there. Haines could pick up 4 to 6 inches. Again, expected snowfall amounts over the next 24 hours. Upper Lynn Canal, winter weather advisory. You could see 4 to 10 inches of snow at the most there. It's a little bit heavier than south central Alaska. And moving on to satellite imagery, you can see a low pressure area standing out quite vividly, moving northward toward Kodiak Island, still south of Sitkinak though, but getting closer this afternoon. And to the west of that feature, a big area of cold air pouring down south of, or across the Bering Sea there, with kind of the Arctic boundary right across the Pribilof Islands down to Unmak Island, with snow showers out over the entire Aleutian chain there, and quite a bit of cloudiness as well. And then the frontal boundary off to the east, pushing up to the North Gulf Coast. About 1.25 inches of rain fell on Kodiak State Airport in the last 12 hours today. Of course, 24-hour amounts were heavier. And also in the same period, Middleton Island picked up about 0.6 of an inch of precipitation. And Portage had about 1 1/3 inches of rainfall in the last 12 hours there. And of course, higher elevation saw that fall as snow. About 1/3 to 1/2 inch of rain falling toward Yakutat, and then lighter amounts over the northern panhandle, and generally dry over the southern southeast coast, at least through mid-afternoon. And then up over the interior, pretty light amounts back to the west and to the north, pretty negligible amounts actually. And dry over the northwest part of the state with the gusty winds. Point Hope seeing winds gusting 44 miles an hour, peak wind gusts there. And then over the interior, Indian Mountain, Utopia Creek area had peak wind gusts about 41 miles an hour. And then Delta Junction, seeing some downsloping winds there, gusting about 40 miles an hour. And you can see the way the holes appear in the clouds there coming across the Alaska Range. Get the downslope clearing areas there. and then it rises again into the White Mountains. You may pick up a little bit of precipitation there in the mountainous terrains north of Fairbanks, and then that tapers off in toward the Yukon Delta. But enough moisture should get into the eastern interior for that 1 to 3 inches of snow over the upper Yukon Valley for the winter weather advisory with the gusty winds. Otherwise, generally below zero along the Arctic coast into the North Slope, minus 20s and minus 30s below, mid minus 30s below for the low temperatures this morning, and not warming too much more than that in the afternoon, but definitely warmer air coming northward, spreading up to the North Gulf Coast there. Will continue that warming trend, especially as that low center pulls north and weakens as it pulls northwestward in toward Bristol Bay. Probably see temperatures rise over the breezy areas of south central Alaska into the mid to upper 30s later tonight and into early tomorrow. Otherwise, there's that low center parked just southwest of Sitkinak, there, Kodiak Island, about 970 millibars, and the front approaching the North Gulf Coast area, Middleton Island, with storm force wind gusts going on, definitely gale force winds along and ahead of that front in the offshore areas there. And then the gusty winds with a tight gradient there over the central and western Brooks Range of the western Arctic coast, the 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts there. And generally breezy, again, higher terrain of the interior, quite a few isobars across the interior of the state. And cold air with widespread areas of light snow and snow showers from about the Pribilofs westward, covering the Bering Sea, pushing on down toward the Aleutians today. And for tonight, that'll continue, kind of starts tapering off over the Aleutians as the southward push weakens, with the low center pulling northward into Bristol Bay, weakening quite a bit. The northerly breezes will weaken over the Bering Sea and just be left with a widespread area of light snow, clouds, lower flying conditions, snow showers, especially over the Pribilofs, kind of a mixed condition for the Alaska Peninsula. And Kodiak Island, generally rain at sea level with a mixture higher up. Same thing for the North Gulf Coast. As that low pulls northward, look for some gusty southeast winds, east-southeast winds, and rain along the coast, rain and snow, mixed precipitation inland, but not getting too far in, except for the southern Copper River Basin, Prince William Sound. Looking at some possibly pretty significant snows there. Rain and snow for the southeast coast. And as that front washes out, and you can see the next system wrapping up, winding up there southwest. We'll see tomorrow that pulls north and northwest to just south of Kodiak Island, with the front washing out as it approaches the coast. And from there, we'll go to the forecast for Friday. And again, another weakening low just south of Resurrection Bay, with front there along the southwest coast, or front weakens into a trough along the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle for diminishing rain, but it keeps rainfall going. It's kind of unsettled for the Kenai Peninsula and the Panhandle through the day on Saturday. Next warm front spreading rain up to the Queen Charlotte's and Dixon entrance, and a pretty good front brings gale and actually storm force winds over the western Aleutians and gale force winds to the central areas, with a general increase in the winds over the Fox Islands, probably not until Saturday evening. Low temperatures tonight, minus 25 to minus 35 or 40, below zero from the North Slope out to the Arctic coast, and then either side of zero in the central interior there, with 20s to lower 30s south of the Alaska Range. And pretty mild in the Panhandle, lows staying in the lower 40s, otherwise upper 30s, and out west mid-20s for the central Aleutians, and just a shade under 20 for the Pribilofs. Highs tomorrow, 5 to 15 central interior, below zero from the North Slope and the Arctic coast, 32 to 42 south central Alaska. Kenai Peninsula, mostly like 38 to 44 for your highs. Same thing for Prince William Sound. Upper 30s northern Panhandle, mid 40s to the south, lower to mid 40s Kodiak Island, lower 30s for the Aleutians. And then the low Saturday morning, 25 to 35 below North Slope to the Arctic coast, and 5 above to maybe 10 below for the central interior. Not too bad. 20s south of the Alaska Range, just above zero for the Copper River Basin, and mid-20s to upper 30s for the Panhandle, near 30 Kodiak Island, and then the 20s over the Aleutians and the Pribilofs and much of the Bering Sea and the Alaska Peninsula, at upper teens in Bristol Bay. Saturday afternoon highs, 5 to 15 central interior, 25 to 35 south central Alaska, warmer along the coast, and in the lower 40s for the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Friday morning, IFR Central North Slope down across the Brooks Range and then southeastward across the upper Yukon Valley, and marginal VFR southward to about Eagle and running along the mid-Yukon River And then becomes VFR for the Yukon Delta northward, Seward Peninsula, northwest coast, Noatak Valley area into Selawik. And then IFR, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula. All of the Panhandle IFR tomorrow. And for Bristol Bay, IFR pushing into southern Kuskokwim Valley and then up along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, southern Kodiak Island, and a band of IFR across St. Matthew and the Pribilof Islands, otherwise Bering Sea marginal VFR, including the Aleutians. And for the afternoon, areas of IFR up over the northern interior and a big area of IFR over the southwest part of the state, Kuskokwim Valley, westward there, becoming marginal along the southwest coast, Yukon Delta coast, eastern Norton Sound, VFR, northern Bering Sea, Seward Peninsula, northwest part of the state there, Noatak Valley out to the western Arctic coast, and still a band of IFR covering St. Paul, maybe St. George Island, but now south of St. Matthew Island. Marginal VFR, all of the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, Madanuska, Susitna Valley, all marginal, southern Copper River Basin. A little bit of improvement over the southern Panhandle, otherwise mostly IFR. VFR for the Tanana Valley up in 40 Mile Country into Copper River Basin. And then for Saturday morning, marginal VFR across southern Alaska with IFR from northern Cook Inlet, across all of the southwest interior, up to the mid-Yukon River Valley area, back across Buckland to near Shishmaref, just east of Shishmaref, with IFR just south of St. Matthew Island. Otherwise, marginal VFR for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. A little bit of IFR slipping on up to Amchitkin. That's about it. Pretty solid IFR for the Panhandle. And for the afternoon, band of IFR there from the Yukon Flats, Fort Yukon, Beaver, Chukyitsik, on down to Eagle. And south of there, big area of IFR, western Cook Inlet, looks like the Susitna Valley, Madanuska Valley, IFR, westward to Norton Sound, all of the Seward Peninsula to Savunga, and another band of IFR coming into the western Aleutians, pushing to Adak and possibly Atka late in the afternoon with the next system. Still IFR for the North Gulf Coast on down the Panhandle. Passes Zenituvik, IFR becoming marginal. Adigan, though, staying IFR throughout the entire day. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR at times throughout the day on Friday. And for rainy, marginal VFR, western entrance, otherwise IFR. Windy, marginal VFR. And Isabel, marginal VFR, improving to VFR throughout the afternoon hours. And Mentasta, good VFR the entire day. And for Tanita, IFR, improving to marginal VFR. Portage, same trend, starting out lowest conditions in the morning, best in the afternoon, possibly marginal. And for Chilkoot and White, IFR at times the entire day. Freezing levels at the surface just south of the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, cutting up through Shelikof Strait, south coast of the Kenai Peninsula, just south of the North Gulf Coast, cutting across the Panhandle with 2,000 feet, kind of 2,000 to 6,000 feet there across the southeast coast. Icing. Considerable moderate rime icing there pushing into the Panhandle. That's where the heaviest will be, and also some considerable moderate possible for Prince William Sound, south coast of the Kenai Peninsula, with areas of isolated moderate across much of central and northern interior, cutting off at the Brooks Range, and then just elevated threat of some possible icing across much of the Bering Sea to the Aleutians, but the heavier action definitely along the southeast coast. And for the jet stream, 120 knot jet max there just south of the Panhandle, just clipping the southern areas there, and lighter to the north, otherwise southwest 70 to 95 knots from the Kenai Peninsula up towards Eagle, lighter up over the north and northwest interior, and not too bad out over the Bering Sea, westerlies at about 80 knots across the central Aleutians. 9,000 feet, not much going on out west, wind-wise, 40-knot winds across the Copper River Basin out of the southwest. Strongest winds over the southern Panhandle up to 45 to 55 knots. 3,000 feet, strongest winds again approaching the south coast of the Panhandle, but northeasterly 60 to 70 knots there from the northwest coast across the Russian Far East. Turbulence, considerable moderate chop, Panhandle, south central Alaska, and the northwest interior, as well as the western and central Brooks Range.
Hello, gazers of the stars, Trace here. We just passed perihelion, the moment where the Earth reaches its closest orbital point at exactly 1:52 a.m. Eastern. But astronomers, they don't use Eastern time, they use Coordinated Universal Time. A day in UTC contains exactly 86,400 seconds, except when they need a leap second because Earth's orbit is imperfect. They measure those seconds using atomic clocks all over the world. It's so precise, we can measure fractions of seconds lost due to time dilation effects on fast-moving spacecraft as described by Einstein's theory of relativity. It's wild. Pop out at 10 a.m. UTC to look east and find Arcturus and Boötes the herdsman. Because some of the sky is visible somewhere at all times. Notating an event in UTC tells astronomers exactly when an event occurred without converting for daylight saving or time zones. It's great. So keep looking up.
Tsunamis are a big threat not only to Alaska but around the Pacific because we have a lot of really big fault lines, and when they move in big earthquakes, they often move the water around them, and that's what causes tsunamis. I am Summer Ohlendorf, and I'm the science officer at NOAA's National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. Alaska's main tsunami threat is from the subduction zone that lays along the southern end of the state. When an earthquake happens underneath the ocean at one of these subduction zones, the edge of one of the tectonic plates ends up kind of flipping up as stress is released at that plate boundary. And when it flips up, it pushes up the water that sits on top of it, and it moves a whole lot of water all at once. And that water all then becomes part of the tsunami wave. Just like when you throw a rock into a pond, you get a series of ripples that head outward from where the rock landed. Tsunami waves travel outward from the disturbance caused by the earthquake. And that means you can get multiple waves, and they're really long waves that can last for hours. Tsunami waves can be hundreds of miles long, from one crest to the next crest. And that means that those crests, or the tops of the two waves, can come in 20 minutes apart to an hour apart. In the deep ocean, tsunami waves are actually usually pretty small. They can be anywhere from a few centimeters to maybe a meter, depending on how far offshore you are. As tsunami waves approach the coast, they kind of pile up on each other, and the energy gets compressed, so they grow in size and they slow down a lot as the wave is squeezed into a smaller space. If you're standing on the beach and a tsunami may be coming, you may hear strange noises like an approaching freight train. You may also see water being sucked away from the shore much further than it would for a low tide, and much faster. And sometimes you can hear things like rattling of sand and rocks. So just being alert for any strange ocean behavior and strange noises is always a good idea when you're near the coast. Most likely you're not going to see something like a huge 100-foot breaking wave as a tsunami approaches. It's probably going to look something more like a step of water that's maybe a few feet high, or just a turbulent mass of water. And it may not be very big, but it's going to be moving pretty fast, and it's going to be probably carrying a lot of debris with it. Even what we think of as small tsunamis can be really dangerous because they're associated with a lot of energy and a lot of fast-moving water. The National Tsunami Warning Center is part of NOAA and the National Weather Service. At the Tsunami Warning Center, we're monitoring streams from seismic data and sea level data 24/7 every day of the year. So the seismic data tells us how the Earth is moving, it tells us when there are earthquakes, and using that data we can figure out where the earthquakes are, how big they are, and how deep they are, which tells us something about the tsunami hazard from those quakes. So as far as monitoring water levels, there's something called the DART system. That stands for Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunamis. And what those are little stations where there's a pressure sensor on the ocean floor and a buoy anchored nearby. The way it knows the difference between a normal ocean swell and a tsunami is mostly because of the wavelength. And when we look at the signal from a DART system, we can see those big long waves and distinguish them from other smaller transient waves. Our system of coastal tide gauges is also distributed worldwide and all across the ocean basins. And what these end up telling us is what the tsunami wave is doing at the coastline. We send out an information statement when there's an earthquake near one of our coastlines that doesn't pose a tsunami hazard. We also have the tsunami watch that may be issued for a faraway earthquake that has the potential to impact one of our coastlines. A tsunami warning is our most serious level, and that is the case where we would want people to evacuate from the coastline. If you hear a tsunami warning, you'll want to evacuate from that hazard zone to travel to a safe shelter, or just anywhere that's inland or higher ground outside of the hazard zone. Ahead of time, you'll want to think about where to go, what to take, and how you'll communicate with your friends and family members once you get there. It's important to remember that during a tsunami evacuation, a lot of people are going to be crowded onto the same routes trying to evacuate. During a tsunami warning, you may hear about it over the TV and radio, an alert on your cell phone. You can also see tsunami information directly on our website, www.tsunami.gov. And we're also on Facebook and Twitter, where we issue our alerts during the event.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at gale force winds on the outer coastline of the Panhandle for the day Friday on the south coast, 35 to 40 knots from the south-southeast. Seas at about 23 feet. And then east winds 30 to 35 knots on the north coast. Lighter winds for Lincoln Glacier Bay northern inside waters, northwest at 10 with seas down to 2 feet. But small crowd advisories for Stevens Passage, southeast winds 30 knots, and full gales there for the Clarence Strait area. Southern inner channel, southeast 40 knots, seas up to 16 feet. And for the day on Saturday, small crowd advisories on the south coast for southeast winds 25 to 30 knots, seas just under 20 feet. Lighter winds on the north coast from the south, 15 to 20 knots, seas around 14 feet. Small crowd advisories for Clarence Strait, south winds 30 knots with 6-foot seas. Otherwise, the central and northern inner channels looking at southeast winds 15 knots with 3-foot seas. Prince William Sound, southeast winds 25 knots with 6-foot seas. Small crowd advisory is also for the North Gulf Coast. Southeast winds 25 knots, seas a lot higher than in Prince William Sound, up around 20 feet. South 25 knots with 20-foot seas for the Barren Islands. Kamishak Bay, south winds only 20 knots. Cook Inlet, south winds 20 to 25 knots, seas running up to 4 feet in the ice-free waters. And for Saturday, northern Cook Inlet, still a mild south breeze at 20 knots, and small craft advisories for southern Cook Inlet, west winds at 25 knots, 3-foot seas, and Kamishak Bay, northwest at 20, Barren Islands, west winds 20 knots, and for the North Gulf Coast, southwest winds 20 to 25 knots, with seas 11 to 13 feet. Lighter winds in store for Prince William Sound on the day Saturday from the south at 15 knots, seas down to 3 feet. Kodiak Island, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, and for the area from Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, west winds 20 knots, 10 to 14-foot seas, and from Cape Sarachev on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula all the way up into Bristol Bay, winds will be fairly light, out of the west at 15 knots. Those will turn southwest at 15 knots there, Bristol Bay and the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, and southwest winds at 20 knots for the Pacific side of the peninsula. Kodiak Island, west to southwest winds 20 knots with 5 to 9-foot seas. And out to the Fox Islands, west-northwesterlies tomorrow 15 to 20 knots, seas running 6 to 8 feet. Adak and Atka, look for a northwest breeze at 15 knots, seas around 8 feet. And small craft advisories for the western Aleutians, Shimiadakiska, east winds 25 knots, seas near 10 feet. Storm warnings in store for the area from Shemya to Kiska on Saturday. Northeast coming up to 50 knots, seas building to 23 feet. 45 knots southeast winds for Amchitka, Adak, and Atka, with seas running 16 to 23 feet. And Unimak Island, gale warning, southeast winds coming up to 40 knots, seas 17 to 20 feet. And for Unalaska Island, east-southeast 30 to 35 knots, 9 to 13 foot seas. Southwest coast on Friday, north to northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. Pribilofs, light variable winds tomorrow 10 knots, and north 25 for St. Matthew Island. Brisk wind advisories for St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound, north winds 25 to 30 knots. And for Saturday, brisk wind advisory, St. Lawrence Island, north winds 30 knots, lighter along the southwest coast. Yukon Delta coast 15 knots out of the north. And the Kuskokwim Delta, light northwest breeze at 10 knots with small craft advisories for the Pribilofs for east winds at about 25 knots and northeast 30 knots for St. Matthew Island. For the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coastline for Friday, northeast winds 15 knots. Brisk wind advisories, western Arctic coast, northeast to 20 knots from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson. Gale warnings, northeast 40 knots, and then back to brisk wind advisories from Cape Thompson to Wales for north winds at 30 knots. And for Saturday, Wales to Cape Beaufort, north winds 30 to 35 knots, brisk wind advisories, western Arctic coast for northeast winds at 25. And for the central and eastern coastlines, east or east-northeast, only 10 to 15 knots. For tonight, look for some areas of light snow or snow showers up over the northeast interior. The weak trough there. Front weakens, and the low really weakens as it pulls across the Aleutian Range into Bristol Bay tonight. Look for the winds to pick up and another push of warmer air coming into southern Alaska, especially along the coast, periods of light rain. And rain and snow. For the Panhandle, snow showers pretty extensive over the Bering Sea, but winds on the light side. And for the day Thursday, still windy through the passes of the Brooks Range there in the western Arctic coast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.